What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today's going to be a bit of a shorter video, and while I do have deck lists results from the Champions League Yokohama in the background, that's not really what we're focusing on today, but I will reference it a bit. I wanted to talk about the separation between Pokemon Japan and the rest of the world's standard format, and kind of a bit of an explanation on why maybe the standard format is unenjoyable, and definitely an explanation on why TPCI, in my opinion, probably couldn't ban or fix things even if they wanted to. Before we get into this, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes, and be sure to use code Celio for 5% off. So, Pokemon Company, the main Pokemon company, their current standard format is roughly Ultra Prism through Vivid Voltage. As you can see here, Limitless lists it as Ultra Sun and Moon through Amazing Volt Tackle. So it's roughly what would equate to our Ultra Prism through Vivid Voltage. So they don't have a scheduled rotation to my knowledge. They, like, seasonally, yearly, annually, they do not have a scheduled rotation. Kind of like we have outside of Japan an expected rotation that's going to happen in August or September every year. Japan does not have that to my knowledge. They go a little bit longer without rotation sometimes, and their rotation doesn't always happen in the same part of the season or part of the year to my knowledge as well. So while Japan Creatures Incorporated specifically, they do have an entire part of their Pokemon TCG team just specifically for testing the card. So there's a design team and then there's a testing team. The testing team is known as the Pokemon Card Lab. Now, the design team, the last time I saw it reported, was about 20 people, and they were full-time testers. So they worked approximately 35 hours of testing a week for the cards that the design team were making. But what you really have to what you have to bring into account there, because you might think, well, how did they test 35 hours a week with ADP, Zacian, and Boss's orders, and they didn't realize that it was this degenerate, or how did they let that go by? One thing to think about is maybe when they were testing Zacian, they weren't testing it with ADP. Or they tested Zacian and ADP and then decided the next set they wanted to have a gust effect, but they couldn't go back and, like, unprint ADP, so they just let it go because they wanted the gust effect to be in the format. But what's really important is something like our current Team Up Through Darkness Ablaze was almost 100% never tested by that testing team, because at that time they were testing Ultra Prism Through Darkness Ablaze, and then after that they were testing Ultra Prism through Vivid Voltage. They didn't have that rotation coming up, and of course we do have a game design portion of TPCI, but their input on these kinds of things has never been divulged to the public. So we're not really sure how much, if any, input the North American section TPCI has on the outcome of these cards that are being designed over in Japan. But I think it's safe to assume that these formats were either not tested at all, referring to something like Team Up Through Vivid Voltage, which we are about to play in a couple months outside of Japan. I would have to assume that either these formats were never tested because Japan was testing Ultra Prism through Vivid Voltage, or they were tested very lightly, or they were tested but the input was from the North American sect and input was not taken as heavily as the Japanese testing team. Those are like the three possibilities I could see. I don't have any fact on this, of course, but the fact I do have is that Japan is testing for their format and they're designing cards for their format. And I don't think it's ever been as prominent as it is now, but I think that I think their format is a lot healthier than ours. This is from a 1,500 player IRL tournament, which I'll be covering more of on the channel. This was held in Japan with pandemic precautions being used. LimitlessTCG.com doesn't have all the results yet. But something to point out, you know, they still have Jirachi combo decks, you know, so Jirachi combo decks are still popular. That's like all the Mad Parties. They still have Magcargo GX to go with Colossal, so that's definitely influencing a lot of stuff. They still have Thunder Mountain, they still have Electra Power, just some prominent cards that we don't have for our standard format. But it also seems like ADP Zacian is not as much of a prominent force in their format. Of course, this is only one tournament, so time would tell, but the highest placing one was top 16, and then Takuya Yoneda was in top 32 with Zacian ADP as well. But this isn't really a video about Zacian ADP. It was just a video to kind of discuss how I view, or how I assume, the testing process is, and that the formats that North America play, and honestly that World Championships is played in, are probably never tested by the design team, or tested very lightly, because they're testing for their own format, which makes sense. But this just goes into, we need a global format for the game to be like at its peak state, I think. And having a global format would also mean that PTCGO would be an even more heavily used software by Japan, and potentially we could get a connection between TPC and TPCI for PTCGO, and then that could, you know, the possibilities are endless where the development could go for that. So I think a global format would be best. Now, it was quoted in a Pokemon.com post when Belelba and Bryson Man and Mismagius were originally banned and announced to have a redesign coming in the future back at the end of July, or yeah, I think it was the end of July when those cards were banned. They said it was they announced it as soon as Japan announced they were banning it, and TPCI said it was in an attempt to create a more either universal or more global format for the game. So obviously it's not, they didn't say it's in an attempt to create a universal format, but a closer to universal format. So I took it, and there's a whole video on this channel about that banning process and my assumptions and my guesses for it, but I took it as Japan banned it and told TPCI to ban it, and that's what I assume, because I haven't heard any evidence furthering against that, and I haven't seen anything against that either. So I think at this point Japan decided to ban those cards, so we banned them as well. But the problem is Japan was going to still be playing with Orangurus. They had a new, you know, they have a whole different format. Mill was much more popular. So the Belelba ban was a bigger deal in Japan, because they would still be playing with Oranguru Mill if they didn't ban Belelba, but we would not have, because we had rotation. So just there's such a disconnect. So I'd love to hear in the comments any of your thoughts on this. As always, feel free to disagree or agree with me. I'd love to create more constructive discussion in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the disconnect, if you think a universal format would ever be possible, and the possibilities that you think would come with it if TPC and TPCI were both developing for the same exact card game. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see daily Pokemon TCG content. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you did enjoy it, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.